I am Dana Cappel, an occupational therapist. My colleague is Nitzan. She's an occupational therapist as well, and we both work at the Technology Consulting Center at Beit Dizzy Shapiro. We're going to present on how we are using the iPad for play with children with disabilities. I'm starting with this photo, even though it doesn't actually represent or present a typical play situation. But it is very significant for Noah and I, as it was one of our first experiences using an iPad for a play-type situation with our students. Noah took the photo, so this was a shared experience. And this boy, Guy, he has very limited functional use of his hands, and the interaction here was quite passive. At that time, this was already a few years ago, and at that time, the accessibility features of the device there weren't very many. We didn't have assistive devices to use with the device, but it was a very playful situation. It was a very enjoyable situation, and it was one of the first times that we both realized that this device is going to help us. We are going to be able to use this for our students, and we're going to be able to make change. Since then, the iPad has evolved and has our use of the iPad, and we're going to show you some of that today. There was a lot of debate in the academic and educational circles about what kind of place digital play has in the lives of young children. If it does have a place, what that place is. But tablets and other digital devices are in children's homes. They're in their classrooms. So in the words of Renakina and Kervin, in the article, iPads, Digital Play, and Preschoolers, if digital play in its different forms is to become a significant part of young children's lives, which, as you see, the article is from 2011, and we know that those devices already are a significant part of their lives. They're there. In the developed world, there probably isn't a home without a smartphone or some kind of digital device. So it is important to examine its developmental value from the same perspective that's taken when considering the significance of traditional forms of play in child development. Those devices are there. We need to look at them, and we need to see and measure and look at the impact that they're having on play and on child development. This article refers to the typically developing child. When we consider children with disabilities, we know that the iPad has already had a huge impact, but much of the literature out there is on its impact on communication and on learning. There isn't a lot of literature on its impact for play. In our experience, we have seen a very significant impact on the play opportunities that it affords. I would like to sort of emphasize that we always promote intelligent use of the device. What that means is that we always consider the context, the family, the culture, values. We consider how much is appropriate, when we should use. We wouldn't want to see a typically developing infant in this situation playing with on an iPad. It's probably unnecessary. We wouldn't want to see a typically developing baby in a bouncy chair with an iPad. But if this was a child with disabilities, this might be something that might be appropriate. We always consider intelligent use, and it's an important concept to consider. Before I continue, we need to look at what play is. Play can take many forms. It can be symbolic in nature, it can be constructive, it can be active or quiet, it can be in a group, it can be alone, it can be rule-based, as in board games, or it can be more free. In the literature, it tends to be somewhat of an elusive concept to define. Every researcher or academic that researches play defines it through his own lens, according to his own discipline. As Pedro mentioned, in the Ludi network, we've adopted Garvey's definition. Play is a range of voluntary, intrinsically motivated activities normally associated with recreational pleasure and enjoyment. It means that the child wants to do this kind of play and that they are motivated by what they are doing and not by some external reward, and that they enjoy themselves. We always consider play for the sake of play, play as a behavior, not play as a tool to work on other skills, but play as play. In reviewing the literature and all the different definitions, there were a lot of terms that came up that I'm going to mention that were common to some of the definitions, and we're going to refer to them again later. So play as a behavior is characterized as active. It's not much of a passive activity. It's process-oriented, meaning that the child is involved in the activity of the play and not what comes at the end. And that it often involves some sort of suspension of reality, symbolism, pretend. As occupational therapists, we can't talk about play without talking about playfulness. Playfulness is a construct unique to play, and Anita Bundy, who is an occupational therapist that, because of the Ludi Network, we actually had the opportunity to meet, she developed a model of playfulness and an assessment to assess it. And in her model, playfulness is determined by the amount of internal control a child feels. So how much are they in control of the situation? The intrinsic motivation, how much are they motivated by the activity that they're doing? And their ability to suspend reality, and how able they are to express or receive social cues. So before we continue and look at the play of a child with disabilities, it's important to look at play in a typically developing child. And you can see in this example a 2.5-year-old engaging in pretend play. And please look at all the skills he is using. Constantly talking and sharing. Constantly moving independently, using both hands. He's pretending. He gets up by himself. He moves around. He's decided he wants to do something else. Incorporating elements of fantasy and reality together. Exploring different concepts of size. Many, many skills in one simple interaction.
אולי כוס עם מיץ?
מה זה?
פלפל.
זה לא פלפל. גם זה פלפל.
Yeah. Okay. So, in looking at that video, it's important to really notice.
פלפל.
Sorry.
זה לא פלפל.
Okay. It's important to notice all the different skills he is using. And what we see often in children with disabilities is that those skills are often underdeveloped. They tend to engage in a narrower range of leisure and play activities. And when they do play, they require assistance often and supervision. And when we speak to parents and we're setting goals with parents, it's often a concern. My child doesn't play by himself. My child doesn't have many things that they like to play with. When we started introducing the iPad, we started to see independent play. And at Beit Izzy, we conducted a questionnaire of parents and staff to hear what they felt the impact was that the iPad is bringing to their lives. And here are some of the things they've said. The iPad created a revolution in their lives and in the life of their child. She can play with all the things she couldn't before, dolls, pretend play. It's a tool that allows him to include other children in his play. So overall, there was a sense of an improvement in the quality of life of the child and the family. So when we think back to that video, that the little boy playing, and we consider a child with physical disabilities, let's say, in that situation, we might see poor manipulation skills and an inability to manipulate all the toys. We might see a child that can't get from sitting to standing by themselves and move around independently. We might see a child that can't engage and communicate effectively and not make his desires or ideas known to the parent or caregiver, which would require more involvement in that activity on the behalf of the parent and the caregiver or the therapist. This in turn may lead to play that is maybe less active, so a more passive type play. Maybe the child will feel less in control, and it might even be less voluntary, maybe because they can't tell me what they really want. They're doing what I want them to do and not what they want to do. And in turn, this can lead to a decrease in play experience, play success, and a playful nature to the play. If we think about a child with intellectual disabilities, we often see a decrease in initiative to play. We may see a decrease in problem-solving skills. If he went to open the cupboard and he couldn't do it, he might give up and move on to something else. They may have difficulty attending for more than a few minutes in the play, and the play doesn't have a chance to develop. And they may have difficulty with pretend. And again, that could lead to a decrease in intrinsic motivation or more passivity to the play, less voluntary nature, and a lead to a decrease in play experience and success. When we consider children with various disabilities, visual impairments, hearing impairments, psychiatric disorders, autistic spectrum disorders, and sensory processing difficulties, then each of those children will have different characteristics that will affect their play. So then, what are the options that we have for children with disabilities? It is very difficult to find off-the-shelf, store-bought toys for children with disabilities. We then need to look to specialty catalogs often, and those toys are very expensive. If we consider outdoor play, in Israel and at Beit Zizi Shapiro, we have an accessible park program, but in many places in the world, that's not a reality, and there aren't accessible outdoor spaces. It requires a lot of creativity of the parents and the therapists to find suitable play options for their children. So why does the iPad work? Well, if you think about physical limitation, your whole game fits in one small rectangle. So if you have some physical limitation, it's eliminated. It works with a fingertip. So a lot of physical limitation is eliminated. It's very intuitive to use. Our students with moderate to severe intellectual disability figure it out very quickly and enjoy it very much. The feedback is immediate, it's significant, the graphics are attractive, and it's extremely motivating. Another reason why we love it for play is because it's age appropriate, and really it's kind of ageless. The elderly use it. Young children use it, students use it. We see it everywhere. And what it gives to this device is a normative factor. That means when a child with disabilities is playing on an iPad, he can look to the child beside him, to his siblings, to the child next door, to people all around him, and they are all using the same device. So he doesn't stand out, he feels like everybody else. Now, Noah is going to come and she's going to show us some examples of exactly what we are doing with our students.
Okay, thanks, Dana. So I'm going to show you a few examples, and I try to connect to the terms that Dana just talked about. And I try to connect to the terms that Dana just talked about, play and playfulness. And in a few minutes, you will understand why I'm so happy to see the woman that's sitting there. For many of our children, using the iPad, it's their first time for independent play. And I'm going to show you now Ronnie. She's an amazing girl, right, Betty? Because just her mother, she just entered the room. I'm very happy you're here. So I'm going to show you a short video of Ronnie. She has, oops, a minute. No, 1 minute. Ronnie, she has pretty severe cerebral palsy. She has difficulty using her hands. They, most of the time, very close to her body. And she's a very smart girl. Her cognitive level is very high, and we were very challenging to find appropriate game, appropriate toy for her. And the iPad was a very good solution. Now I show you. She's playing now Toka Kitchen. It's an app by Toka Boka. I think it may be like, it's 2 years ago, like the first or second time she used the iPad, so it's a little difficult for her.
אז בואי תלחצי על הגזר. מה נעשה עם הגזר? מה נעשה עם הגזר? תראי.
So it's kind of pretend play. After she chose a vegetable from the refrigerator, she can choose the tool from the, she chose the knife. And it's not the conventional pretend play that we know, but it's as close to pretend play that Ronnie can play. And of course, it's very important. And now Ronnie can play many other games, like memory cards or any other games that we want for a 6-year-old girl to play, because it's still difficult for her to use cards or anything that it's big, like board games. And her mother, she told us last year, remember? She told us we had our life before the iPad and after the iPad in a manner of the independency of Ronnie, because before the iPad, Ronnie always needs someone with her when she's playing. And Ronnie, she's a very playful girl. She wants to play all the time. So it sometimes can be even exhausting because you need always to be with her. And after the iPad, Ronnie can play by herself, which is very important. First of all, for Ronnie, because children play by themselves since they are very young, but also for the family. Now, her mother finds, okay, I have another girl here at home I can play with. I have some free time. And if Dana just talk about the quality of life for children and their family, I think it's a good example. Just a minute about Toca Boca. If we're talking about play, I have to mention this company. We use a lot their apps. They are very playful, and I recommend you to visit their website and the blog because they talk a lot about play and playfulness. And we like their apps because they are really, the characters are very humor, and they're very imaginarian and whimsical and creative. And many of the apps are really promote playing together, and they're really great. And here's another example of a kind of pretend play. This sweet girl, she's playing Peppy Beth. Well, Peppy, first of all, she really loves Peppy. Peppy is the character there. It's like Spider-Man for boys, she likes Peppy. So if you tell her there is Peppy in the room, she's coming, which is also very important because sometimes we have problem with the motivation. And you see her here how she's playing.
Puppy.
קודם הראתי לה את הרגליים עם הסבון, אז היא ממש שיחקה ב...
Well, her speech therapist, she told me that many times the problem she has with this girl is that she needs to help her to get her own ideas. And what she's doing now is the first time she saw her have her own idea. She touched the water spout and started to wash Peppy's hair. Because many times with our children, we need to help them to have ideas because their thinking are very concrete. And here in the iPad, she said, it's the first time I see. She just touched the water spout and she started to wash Peppy's head. And also, if we are thinking about when I'm playing with a doll, and if I take a bottle of Neptune shampoo and I'm telling the child, let's put shampoo on the head of the doll, sometimes it's not enough to motivate our children because they need to use imagination and more abstract thinking, which is hard for our children. But if they touch here the shampoo bottle on the screen of the Peppy Beth, there is a bubble and it's so motivate them. They need those stimulating. And if we're thinking about what Dana talked before, we really see the voluntary, the internal perception of control, and of course how much he is enjoying it. And many times people criticize the iPad and said it could be very isolating and we can see the children stuck their face on the screen. But we find it can be really the opposite and it really can promote interaction. For example, the picture on the left, you see the children around the iPad. There's one girl, she's playing and the other children come and see what she's doing, with something that we are not really used to see with other toys, because they're really motivated and they want to see what she's doing, and it's a potential for interaction, for communication between them. The other example here, it's those two sweet girls playing in their free time in the kindergarten. They chose to go there and play. She started to be very bossy. Oh, sorry. Okay. What? And if you're talking about playing together, it's very important to talk about playing together around siblings. For our children, many times we know how it's so hard for them to play with their brothers and sisters. And many parents told us that since they use the iPad, they really see the interaction between our children and their brother and sister, because everybody liked the iPad. Like Dana said, there's no age, everybody love it. You can see here, very normative situation. Sitting on the sofa, playing memory card app. Yeah. First of all, I don't think Henley will ever play memory card if it's a real one, and not in the app. And there is no chance her brother play with her any other game. And what's also important here is that she's playing memory card with six cards. For her brother, it's not. It's very, very easy, but still, he's playing with her. And this is very nice about the iPad, because if I take a simple app like a cause and effect app, even for me, if it's nice, I will like it because it's in the iPad, and people love using the iPad. They like to touch in and to see what happened and the feedback. And we usually, sometimes we use multiplayer games. It's app that there are for multiplayer users. And this is an example of using Talking Tom. Talking Tom is a very famous app. I think it's the first app that I've known. It's very, very popular. And we had the chance to meet Isa. Last time we were in Cyprus in the Ludi meetings. And she's a developer. She's from Slovenia. It was very interesting to hear her story. She developed the app. She has now a very big success company. And she said, we start getting feedback from therapists, the impact that this game have on children and adults with disabilities. And it's very important for us to be in contact with those app developers, because this is our way to make any change. So she was very interesting about our story, and I really hope she will come to visit us at Bet Easy Shapiro. She said she will. Now you see Yahel playing with Talking Tom. It was very spontaneous, so just see it and took one. I'm sure you see how fun it is. And she has two iPads because the pink one is for communication. So it's great. It's what really was. She chose to do it, and it wasn't in the therapeutic session, which is very good because many times we want to work, and it's good because she started making voices, which is one of our goals with Yael. But if you're in a therapeutic session, it's much harder. But here, when she's doing, it was her choice free time. We got it all. And this happened in the Snoozy room, which is one of my favorite rooms at Bet Easy Shapiro. It's a very calm room. It's white and quiet, and you have this soft sound and soft light. And Dana, she's doing a weekly group there with the physiotherapist, and sometimes she uses the iPad. Well, here she used the heat pad. I call it Snoozy App because when you touch, it's a cause and effect app, which is very suitable to the snooze land because everything is very easy there. And this guy is lying on his stomach, so he can't use his hands. And he starts using the app with his nose. I don't know if it was by accident or not, but he started using it. And the girl that was sitting beside him, she found it hilarious, and she started laughing. And she started imitated him, although she can use her hands. She started using the iPad also with her nose, and it was so fun situation to start laughing and imitate each other, and it was really enjoyable. And it could never happen without the iPad because Guy couldn't activate any other tool. So it was great. And another example for Guy, here use switches. And I show you the video and then I explain. He uses two switches with his hand. Each switch is another function. And then you see the smile. Amazing. So if you remember our first slide, the picture of Dana, she's holding the iPad and guy was sitting beside her. It's this guy. And now we really progress, and Apple really progressed because we can use switches with the iPad, which is really amazing. And it's a very simple game, even for Guy. It's not really challenging, but he really loves it because he can play it by himself. So he always chooses to play those kind of apps. And again, you can see all those terms like internal control, voluntary, and of course, enjoying. In my last example, which I find very, very important, she's a student in our school, and she's playing the same app like Guy, the Touch to Jump by Inclusive Technology. And we are have hard time to find a game for Adi because she's really passive. There's nothing really that she's interested in. We are always thinking about what to give our children in their free time. And since she starts, because we don't want to use babyish toys, and since she knows the iPad, she really improved in this aspect. Look. So it's a very simple app, but we find it really amazing because for children with intellectual disability, and she has a really severe intellectual disability, usually they are very, very passive. And here she's doing something, she's doing like she's supposed to do it, she's doing it from the beginning to the end. And now she really improved, she can also point with his finger. And if I open the iPad for her, she can find the app that she likes, and she's amazing with that. And she also starts to use 2 pictures on the iPad. So it's very important for us, and we see it a lot in a student. And also sometimes because of the iPad, we really found skills that we didn't know that exist in our children, because they did never show such skills before the iPad. And
Thanks for listening. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
so if you don't understand, thank you.